discuss, we're going to go ahead and discuss the oversight hearing discussion and talk about some member roles and just logistics.
Yes. Okay, everyone. So, last time we talked about this framework for oversight hearings. I was hoping to do a little more work on this in the last week, so we're a little delayed, but I think we'll be okay. I've generated. I'm sorry. Hold on one second. The thing that I hope to do, I have a framework for how to approach the next 3 weeks. Again, the mayor is looking for answers from us by the end of the month, which is on a 30th. It's on a Monday. So my hope is that first week we can have the oversight hearings done and then have answers ready for you folks to review and fully sign off on. And so I'm going to give the framework for getting this done, and then we can talk about talk feedback, anything like that. And so you guys, my hope is by the end of tonight we can have the go ahead and I can start focusing just on this, getting back to the idea of focusing, slowing down one thing. I think this is that thing. So the framework is having a bunch of individual voices that are rarely at the table, being heard, not speaking on behalf of an organization, but speaking on the behalf of themselves as an individual and the lived experiences they have as everything from a person of color to a person who's faced poverty or homelessness, these kind of things. And so I said last time that my first steps would be drawing up an initial list of communities that we would hope to hear from, and then a list of community groups that could help us connect to those people, and then help those individuals provide written answers. And so I've done that. Got a initial set of individuals, an initial set of groups together. And the last thing I need to do is just come up with an initial set of questions that can be uniformly answered by every person. So the hope is that the next week, the week of the 15th, we would be able to have conversations with every single one of those partner organizations, like probably Vocal New York and the Police Accountability Board Alliance. That would help us get those people together. That would be one thing done next week. The next thing done next week is having the board review the initial set of questions and the initial set of community groups we'd like to reach out to, so that you folks could pour your experience and perspectives to make sure that we're hearing from all the right communities, et cetera, and the right questions are being asked of these folks. So the week of the 15th, we'd be reaching out to partner groups. They would start contacting and figuring out individuals that could help testify. I would work on logistics, most importantly, language access. Ideally, I would like people to submit testimony in their preferred language and have us provide translation to the public, whether that's ASL, Spanish, whatever it is. And so making sure that part of the intake process is letting people know to come to us as you are. That's going to be very important. Also setting up logistics in terms of the live streaming. I've been working on some of the administrative work to figure out how we can live stream simultaneously to both YouTube and Facebook to make sure that as many people as possible are being engaged with both our board meetings and this kind of oversight hearing. So those kind of getting the logistics down, finalizing the questions and the people we want to have, and then the outreach to the groups should be done by the end of the week of the 15th. The week of the 22nd is figuring out two things, really. It's nailing down, confirming the individuals who we do want to testify, making sure that the partner organizations are helping them answer, provide written testimony. I think an easy way to do this is to have a standard Google form that allows them to take their time in writing the testimony. The partner organizations can provide them with the computers or services in which they can come to and fill out the testimony. Through a Google form or something, they'd be able to submit the testimony to us and then to receive a printout that they could read live on the air. That week would be identifying the people, getting them the testimony written, and having them sign up for slots. I would do this on the back end, making sure that they could we would have probably slots of 5 to 9 p.m., probably on a Monday and a Tuesday, where people could provide their live testimony. So that would be the week of the 22nd in terms of the live testimony. The week of the 22nd, I also hope to provide an initial draft set of answers for all of those secondary questions, the ones that I discussed last time, that don't need to necessarily be answered by the community, but the PAB can still provide answers on. Things like, how should discipline and oversight work in this community? So kind of fine grade questions that the board shall still provide answers to. So by mid or end part of the week of the 22nd, I hope to have those answers to all of you, so you can start reviewing them and see, okay, like here's some changes we think. We can't get into super detail and spend weeks providing the right answers on this. But my hope is to have everyone review that initial draft set of answers, so that by the week of the 29th, not only can we hold the live oversight hearings, but also on that Thursday the 3rd at the board meeting, have the board approve the final set of answers, both the ones that I drafted an initial set of in working with all of you, and having that live testimony allow us to provide answers to that first set of questions about how should policing work in this place. And so that by the end of the week of the 29th, we could submit our answers to the task force. So that's kind of a 3-week plan to get us where we need to be. Again, this can't be extraordinarily detailed given the resources that we have, but I think this is with the community resources we have, with our partner organizations, with our board resources in terms of our experience and knowledge, I think that we can get this done. And so that's the framework for the next 3 weeks. And I'm happy to answer any questions in terms of how can board members participate, et cetera.
I have a question. So Connor, can you provide the board with a timeline so that they can follow along, because there's so many moving parts, and I think that would be helpful.
Yes. So my hope is to this meeting provide both the list of people the list of community subgroups, list of community groups that we reach out to help us, and then that timeline, so you can have it all in front of you. I'm sorry, I was drafting one earlier and I didn't have it to share the screen. But yes, I can provide that too, Chair Wilson.
Connor?
Yes.
One of the things that occurs to me is that this kind of plan has a lot of anticipatory elements to it. Answers that you think are going to be, people are going to get to choose from answers that you provide, it sounds like, and may not include the answers that they actually would produce themselves spontaneously.
Bob, can I just interject?
Yeah.
So my hope is not to do that. My hope is to have essentially probably each person answer somewhere from like 5 to 7 questions. And these questions will be pretty broad. Things like, what do you think police, the core, what do you think police should be doing in our community? Or what is an interaction with that has defined policing in your mind? So these kinds of questions, and there's many others, what instances do you think police officers should not be first responders to? These are questions where it's open-ended, and that's my hope really in this exercise, is not to have people fill out a survey, but for people to provide narrative, qualitative responses that can help us sift through things, because the mayor already had a survey that was kind of quantitative in nature, and my hope is to provide the qualitative responses.
As far as I know, there are no ready-made answers. I think we're just looking for community perspective. Is that correct?
What I'm saying is that it's very difficult to produce questions that don't lead to answers.
I'm still not understanding.
Bob,
experiences, not for necessarily. We're looking for community experiences and wishes, I guess. I know wishes is kind of a wishy-washy word, but if somebody asked me, what I would think, how would I want my police to police me? or how it would like my police experience or my experience with the police to be. I'm sure people would have an answer for that, I guess.
And I just want to say, Bob, these questions that we'll be pulling from, they're the ones that the mayor has assigned. They may be slight modifications of those, but the mayor has given us questions that we want answered. So, there may be leading or there may be that in it, but it's kind of embedded in the task.
Well, I was thinking more of a free flowing discussion group, that you could start off with a basic question, but encourage the group to take their own direction in expressing what they felt was important. And then you'd have to pull out of that general conversation what you thought the answers were.
Ida?
So looking for themes, it sounds like.
Ida?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it sounds like some of those questions are open-ended questions, so, people can fill them as what's based on their experience and things like that. But Connor, my question to you is, so are these sessions gonna take place via Zoom? Like, how are you going to invite people, the different groups, and what is that gonna look like?
So my hope, the live part of the testimony is actually, and I wouldn't say that it's not the least important, but my hope is to have people, submit written testimony that we can deal with and compile. And the point of the live,
There's no video. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So the point of the live testimony is so that Rochesterians can watch and see people speak, one of, a board member, me, whoever would just be asking the questions that they'd already answered, and they would just provide those answers. And by live streaming all of this, it just provides people a way to, watch and engage. And so I just say that to say, the hope is to have the live stream sessions be very structured. We know generally how much time each person is going to take. We know when they're going to speak. We know what they're going to speak essentially. So my hope is by having it so structured that it will be a little easier to manage the thing when it actually gets off the ground.
Right. Sorry, Danielle. I think Bob was talking about focus groups. So are there no opportunities to kind of do virtual focus groups so that we can have, I think what he's trying to say is that there will not be any room for spontaneous conversation, because there may be some other emerging themes that come out of having some spontaneous focus group sessions. Is there an opportunity to do that? Is there any way we can build that in? Or, is it possible?
Do we want to go around and just have people say things and then I can respond?
Well, I'm sorry, Danielle, were you wanting to say something before Matthew? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, after listening to the questions, I was wondering, what if people wanted to talk about something other than the questions? Will there be a platform, or would there be a time to where they will be able to discuss those things? I know you're saying structure, which is definitely needed. However, what if it's something that's outside of the lines that are, in place?
Matthew?
Yeah, I was thinking that that's part of the virtue of having a board like this is, I know it's a bit more labor intensive, but if each of us committed to having within our respective constituent or community groups, finding 8 to 10 people to just sit down and have an hour conversation on Zoom, and then we report it back. So obviously it might not all be public, it might not all be live stream, but we could at least start to get a sampling and use some of our use the technology, use the opportunity of COVID to use Zoom, and just start to get a general sense of the landscape, as I think Dr. Harrison is fond of saying, or Dr. Harvey, getting a general sense of things, and we can report back, and then using that kind of general data start to formulate some specific questions. But I think also, it's not going to be a grand public project, but it would at least start that process, and also give board members a way to start to connect individually, whether it's with our city council district or just the communities that we're involved with. So I think there's more work we can do, even if it's not as formal, to start to get some of the responses. And that casual setting might elicit some more informal responses from folks that like we could certainly filter or translate back so that nobody feels like they're exposed, but get some more authentic responses.
Now, I know that we do have to have questions that are, answers that have to be submitted back for the governor's executive order. So I'm wondering if, I actually really like the idea of an informal discussion. I think it really, you really would get more of a, a homegrown response. I'm just concerned about, or just wondering and just posing the question to the group about if we do that, what does that data collection look like within the group? Will there be somebody taking notes? Will there be, will we have, ASL interpretation, or, those that are Spanish speaking, will they be able to have a translator, like those type of logistical things? Because if that's the case, we're talking about a lot of people having a lot to say, and we'll all have to, collect all of that data and kind of make it into, funnel it or cook it down and make it sure we can submit it for the governor's order. So it's just something to think about. Who was first? Matthew, Danielle?
No, I
and-
was.
Oh,
I was
okay.
after-
Sorry, Dora.
Okay, I want to have a different way of looking at this. We have a really limited specific task to take care of. And I think we have to just focus on these questions now with the understanding that for our purposes later, as we review policies and procedures and do our work and all that stuff, focus groups and these kind of discussions can be helpful, but I just don't see how we're going to, I don't see how we're going to get it done in time anyway, and let alone trying to do more. The other issue is having had this experience of doing, sort of extensive interviews and trying to, extract the data or whatever from that. Bob talked about subjective, right? What I like if somebody else is answering a question and the way they perceive that question, then that's their voice. If I'm hearing everybody's voice and I decide what to take out of that, that's much more subjective to me. So I would just really encourage us to say, yes, the discussions and all this is a really useful process, but it might not be the most effective one right now.
Danielle, and then Matthew.
So, George, just on clarification, are you saying it's not the most effective one right now because of the time constraint, or are you saying it's not the most effective right now because we can get all the feedback from the structured questions we were given?
No. Because of the time constraint, but also because we have to answer specific questions, right? The governor doesn't want to hear all those other things that might come up right now. We have to structure what we say. So we have to me at least, that's the task right now. It's not necessarily what we want to be doing in the long run, but for right now, I feel like that's what we have to do.
And I just want to interject one thing. This stage is having the PAB and RACE and RPD and UCLM provide answers, right? These answers will be sorted through and put into some kind of proposal, and that proposal will go to the community in February, and there's going to be community feedback sessions. And so there is another point at which we can have community engagement and review of this, and we can, lead or do whatever we want. That's not an answer on this specific stuff. I just want to have that awareness.
I did have something else. I know, Shawnee, you said, how would we do that? I like what Matthew said of breaking it down by our district, or if we go out and we get 8 to 10 people, the breaking it down by the district, I thought that was that was very clever. Or just getting 8 to 10 people to, that we can talk to, that's willing to speak with us for an hour. But what if we look at our schedules and see who can do what, what days and what time, and we can put 2 people in one session, one person take notes, one person ask questions, just flip halfway through. We can structure it some way if we did want to do that. Jordan, now that you've clarified your initial response, now I get what you're saying as far as the governor doesn't want to hear about these types of questions that we will go off. But can we find somewhere, if that's the case, can we find somewhere else to put this data? Can we use this data somewhere else, if that makes sense? Am I saying that clear?
Yeah,
Laura.
I'm just wondering if this is the time to get that data. In other words, when we have this heavily duty timeline for this task, to pay attention to other stuff right now, to me, is not a good use of our time.
Definitely. I completely understand that. So if we take that into consideration, we would definitely adjust the time limit, or, the time frame or when we do it. However, I just want to make sure if we do it, we use the data somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Madam Chair,
yeah, go ahead.
uh,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a quick comment that the kind of information gathering that's going to be done here is the kind of information gathering that the PAB board is going to need in the future.
Right.
So it makes sense to construct a system that works now
I agree.
well enough, but works to our advantage in the long run.
I agree. Matthew?
Yeah, I just think, there's obviously limitations to it, but at the same time, we need to get in the habit as board members of starting to communicate with our respective constituencies. And I know, at least in my context, I can't speak for everyone else's, but like, if I go on the Highland Park Neighborhood Association page and say, hey, next Thursday, I'm going to have a 1-hour conversation of people who want to have some feedback around a specific set of questions that Governor Cuomo wants to know some feedback on. Again, I know that's a very particular, specific subset of Rochester. Maybe not representative of the whole, but I think I could get 5 or 6 people to at least give some feedback and to get us started. And we can either wait for an ideal situation, or we can start to build some data and some responses, and then we can build on that, and then realize like it's limited. But I think, at some point we need to get in the habit of communicating with our respective constituencies and with the city in general. And it might not be ideal, but if we pick 3 or 4 questions we want to at least use as starting points, I think we can also trust, because every step of the way on this thing we've said, this is the will of the people, 75%. We represent the people of Rochester, so we need to start letting the people of Rochester speak. And why not just give it an initial starting point here? I don't know. I mean, it might not be the right venue, but at least let's consider it more deeply, because I think that's our job as board members, is to listen to folks in the community.
I again say that I'm not necessarily mad at any of that. I think that's actually not a bad idea, because we are community leaders that have access to a lot of people. And if I just want a sampling of folks, I can just, we all have contacts that we can use, and we could get it done in a week. I'm really thinking of time constraints. I'm thinking of paperwork and getting, somebody, again, think about if somebody does not have, what if you can't use it? What if I was going to say a typewriter, for God's sake. What if you can't use like a typewriter? I'm sure we all have that. But what if we can't use what if somebody doesn't know how, what if they're illiterate? What if they don't know how to use a computer? What if they don't know how to do that? It's much easier to get people on like in a giant community center or in a Zoom call or outside and just talk with somebody for a half an hour, have somebody, as long as that conversation can be recorded, we can have it, dictated and get that done. I think that should be something that, honestly, I think is something that we should consider. I didn't know who had their hand up first, so somebody can.
Dr. McIntosh, she's been raising her hand for a
McIntosh.
Yeah. So to your point, I mean, I don't think this portion of it, similar to what Rabbi said, needs to be done necessarily right now. Connor talked about another point where we could do this, but there's other options. I mean, we can do something virtual, but we can also put individuals into groups, into breakout rooms. So that's another alternative. So there's ways to do that, but we just need to have a process in what that looks like. So if we're if we're saying, let's get it done, then we're not going to have a smooth process. So we could take this time to do what the mandate is, but then also while we're thinking about that, develop the process of how we want to see this roll out. And then that way we can have our questions, we can figure out how we're going to use Zoom, we can figure out if there's other community members that we can also have as a part of this to help us kind of facilitate this whole process. Go ahead, Dror.
So I want to step back for a sec. What I heard Connor say is what is needed is basically people to fill out a form, that the form is going to have those questions, right? And we need, because they're collating data, right? So to be honest, having conversations is not the best way of doing that. What I think the best way of doing that is to, if you want to sit down with people to, people, if you feel like there are people for whom sitting down to answer those questions themselves is not going to be productive or a good way of doing it, to make sure that we take the time to have Zoom conversations or personal conversations, however, and help them fill that out or fill it out, like let them dictate to us or whatever. But it seems to me that we need those forms. And again, having had this experience of, that it's also, we can have conversation in that process of having them answer those questions and people feel listened to, but you're not getting that data, you're not getting those stories individually if you have these group discussions and then try to summarize.
Go
Ida?
ahead, Ida.
Are those questions and forms will be translated in Spanish? Is the city doing that across the board?
So I just want to say one thing, Ida. In a meeting this week, I asked specifically about, what are our contracts for, if we need an ASL interpreter, who do we use? And apparently the city has a contract for that. When I asked about Spanish interpretation, as I understand it, there's not a current contract. Now, I'm going to follow up on that to make sure that that's right, which is, anyway, it shouldn't, that should not be right. But we have to, right. Well, we have to do this the right way. And, here's the thing is I still have to get it set up with the purchasing department to make anything. I'm hoping to get that done tomorrow, but it might not be till the beginning of next week. And so I can't, and the thing is that to have contracts, that has to be approved by city council. As I understand, there's a part of the, Stephanie, you can help me with this because I've been getting some different answers. The one thing is that city council needs to approve new contracts. But on the other hand, there's this provision in the city charter that says, beneath $10,000, we don't need city council approval. So I'd love to know if I can sign a personal contract with someone that just, gives somebody money, but I know that there's a RFP process that we have to go through for so many of these things, which is why, and Stephanie, you can correct me, but the easiest way to do this quickly in the next 3 weeks may be through volunteer work, which is not, I strongly I don't believe in that. On the other hand, we are in this tight position. So
Stephanie, what are you saying? Do you have any answer for that or not? Do you want to get back to us?
I mean, I can give you a more complete answer later, but the shorthand is city council approves contracts with a value of over $10,000 or that are a year or more in duration. So there is room for contracts that are below $10,000 and less than a year in duration. They do not need city council approval. All city contracts run through the city's system, which is Munis. That process can take a little time. All contracts have to be approved. I can't give you a specific time frame because depending on the contract, there are different levels of approval. This is something for city council related contracts. I think BJ would be a good resource for how that process works because it's not really illegal so much as a process question, unfortunately.
here's the person.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Ms. Ida,
So,
did you-
yeah, I just wanted to comment, that we've had this issue before with language access, for the city, for the county. It's always an afterthought. And that's an issue for me because this is important and my community's voice needs to be heard. And it will not be heard if there's no translation of these forms for the people. So I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to hope for the best. But I can tell you right now, we volunteer a lot of our time translating things, and that has to stop too. We cannot continue to do that.
What I'll say is,
That's a service and it's a very expensive service.
so I want to make clear that my next step is as I understand it, there's an expedited process for, moving past RFP. That was what was used for, to get WilmerHale through. I think that this is an obvious example of a time when there isn't there's a need for expedited. We have to get this governor's order done. We need language access to facilitate our community. We should not be using volunteer labor to do the right thing. And so I'm going to make it a priority to get this done. If this is the thing that we're going with, if this public testimony, I'm going to get that done.
Matthew, and then Reverend Harvey.
Strikes me that we could pick 3 to 4 questions that elicit a diversity of responses that could start to fill in some of the gaps. It's not going to fill in everything that we do. But that we could not only pick some simple questions, but that could also easily translate them into Spanish, into other languages, so that everyone has access. And again, we're not going to get precise, 100% specific data, but we can start to get a general picture that we could then lead to more specific questions. And again, I think, some of this is like we want to have an easy, fast approach. And some of it is that there's no fast, easy approach. And it's going to require each of the board members to do the thing that the board members were selected to do, which is to engage their respective constituencies. But if we want to really, truly be, as we've said every step of the way, a community representing board, a board that speaks for the people of Rochester, the voting body of Rochester, then that's great. And I think Connor's model is great. I just want to make sure that it's also simple enough to elicit general data, because I think we can get too specific, right? There's this general sense of expertise where we're drilling in too deeply and we miss some of the bigger picture stuff, which actually gives us the data we need. So I want to make sure that we have a commitment to translation into different languages, that we have access to different constituencies, and that I just don't think it's that as complicated as we're making it. Like, I think if we just have some simple questions and we engage with it, like Connor said, then we can get it done.
Yeah.
Rev.
Go ahead.
Oh,
So initially the budget had a deadline and was due by a certain time. Got to have the budget, and we responded to that deadline. Now we're facing another deadline, and I'm only going to say, Connor, one of the things that I did hear say was a relationship with Loretta Scott, because you're going to have some questions sometimes that we as your board don't have the answers to. And so I personally want you to be able to go to some people like Loretta Scott, what I think to be a trusting person about deadlines. I'd rather miss the deadline than spend some money, because the next money is big, and we're still new. We're new. And so I'm cautioning, if it's a choice between missing the deadline and spending money right now before there's some counsel with somebody on city council. But if it's before there's some counsel with somebody on city council, I would rather miss the deadline than spend some money.
So are you talking about the governor's order or the budget? Which one?
I'm talking about the governor's order.
So governor's order is going to be the mayor. That's going to be, we would have to talk with her about that, which I know that has been a back and forth discussion because we have such a small amount of time. So yeah.
I just want to say,
those translation services are needed for everybody working on this, right?
yeah.
So what? Excuse me, I didn't hear that. What'd you say, Drew?
I said presumably those translation services are needed for everybody working on this. In other words, one would hope that Race and whoever else is doing stuff are going to be talking to people in the Spanish-speaking community.
It's the holiday it's holiday season for a lot of people. I strongly submit this deadline is going to be extended. Just like, I'm not saying work in the idea of an extended deadline, but don't go so fast based on this deadline without talking to somebody.
Reverend, there is another meeting of this task force on Monday. I emailed, the mayor's chief of staff asking to confirm when we had to have our answers in. I'm going to bring up during that meeting, Mayor Warren, you've spoken before about the potential to extend this deadline. I know I've had conversations with other task force members about the need to do so. Can we do that? So that's Monday.
Connor, let somebody else ask that question.
Bob, you took the words out of my mouth.
Wait, what? So hold on, y'all, because I mean, so other people are asking the questions, and I appreciate the enthusiasm and knee slapping, but there are
It's not enthusiasm. I'm just saying, Connor.
not you. I'm
let
talking
somebody-
about.
I don't
Let
think
somebody-
this is the
let
time to
somebody
have that
else-
conversation.
Let somebody else ask that question.
Oh, okay.
If the question does not come up at a certain time, then ask a question. But give somebody else the opportunity to ask the question.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but
I will-
that's my advice. That's Bob's advice. Let somebody else ask the question.
Okay, so I do want to give a time check, folks. It is 8:03 p.m. So I just want to be mindful of time. And I know that we need to kind of tie this up a little bit. So what are our next steps then? So the next steps are we have the governor's order, we have the governor's meeting coming up next week, and we need to nail down a process that we can all agree on. And so I think we just need to figure out what that looks like, because I know everybody has really some great ideas about how to do this quickly and efficiently. I just think we just need to, and also what Reverend Harvey's saying about, wondering or just finding out more about an extension, a deadline extension. So I think that's also in play as well. So just wanted to if there's anything else we wanted to talk about before we wrap up today.
I just want to make sure that I have clear instructions moving forward.
Yes.
About what it is I should be doing. I know that talking to get the details about timeline. Just learn it. My goal is to learn that information, however it comes to me on Monday, and then I want to be able to start tomorrow. Sending you folks this framework moving forward, and then I can start working on it. So if there are major objections to this framework moving forward, I want to know. I think one sticking point we should agree on is if the city cannot give us the funds for language translation, should we even do this? That is a very important thing that I do want to address, because not doing it right might not be, because there's alternative ways. We could just not engage the community in this way and provide the answers on our own. You're a diverse set of people. You can provide a lot of community perspectives on this. We can do that. That's another way to do this. But that's
Language translation is important because there's people who don't speak English in our community as fluently. Like it's a non-negotiable. It's got to be everyone or it's nobody.
Good.
I totally agree with that. Also, to be honest, I don't think it's just Spanish.
Right.
Right.
We have to be able to figure out a way to, when we solicit people and they say, our community partners say they need language access, we need to be able to provide that. And it is deeply frustrating that the city does not have a system for that already.
But doesn't the court system does, presumably, right?
We should, right? Yeah.
They should.
Right? Like when I've worked in courts, they always have, you pick up the phone, and dial the number for the language.
Yeah.
In medicine, we have the same thing, right? Celia, we have the phone line that we all use. So, maybe, can I just suggest something to the group? Maybe, that is a huge step, because if we're not able to get language translation services, then we really have to rethink all of this. And so, Connor, maybe you can find that out first and let us know, very like in the early day of tomorrow. That doesn't make sense. Like early tomorrow, maybe we can get an answer for that, so then we know how to proceed.
I'll spend all day doing it.
Yeah, and the forms will be, and you're questioning the translation of the forms too, in the meantime? If we can't get that, you're considering questioning about the form being in Spanish as well.
Yeah, so there are.
Well, again, not just Spanish.
I understand that. We're going with that to see.
Right. So, figuring out how do we translate the form as needed, because we can't translate it, we have to know what languages we need to be able to translate for. And I think that's one, being able to provide it. And then, also for folks, if we do the live streaming of the testimony, to be able to have people, the questions be asked in the appropriate language,
Check with AT&T too.
Mhm.
AT&T does it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's translating the languages of forms that's happening in our city right now?
I actually don't know that question. I think
Yeah, like the Board of Elections.
Put this burden. Why are we putting this on our ED? Why? Where is all the translations coming from now?
so. I think we're trying to find that out, Rev. We're trying to figure out who can do the translation because he doesn't know Burmese, but we have to figure out who in the community is able to translate. Like I know for medicine, like in the community, we have places where there are peers that translate forms into different languages or other services. So we just have to figure out what that is. So that's what I'm saying.
So,
This language is a significant barrier, so we need to figure this out first before we move forward.
so Dr.
What else I would say in public? Since
So-
I said what else I would say in public.
So I know that for COVID, and I'm going to speak specifically for COVID, when it hit, Ibero, American Action League, really had to step in and request the information that was being provided in Spanish because it wasn't. And so as a result, Ibero did take on translating many of the documents. In fact, they even had a staff member that would translate the press conference from the city. But all of that was done, with the good intention of making sure that our community had the information. But no one got paid for that. The same thing happened with DNC. Finally, DNC did hire someone now to do Spanish articles, but none of that information, there was no plan on how to provide that information in Spanish. So, we learned a lot through COVID that this should not even be a conversation now, right? There should be a contract with somebody to translate, whether it's in Spanish, whether it's in any other language.
I think we have to keep in mind, we are the Police Accountability Board. And it sounds like to me, we're adding so many things to the plate right now that I don't know that I want to see the director out there grabbing all of these new things.
Well, I can tell you right now, Ricky, you cannot have a conversation with the community if you don't have a way to translate. I'm sorry.
Agreed.
I agree.
And
But
so maybe it's not his task. I'm not saying that it has to be his task, but I'm just saying that the city has to resolve that because
And it's our mission.
it's a constant issue.
I just want to
Not
remind
our job, it's their job.
Right, but I just want to say it's in the city charter. The city charter says we have to have language accessibility. That's a legal requirement for us, particular. So we don't have a choice on this stuff. And we also have a legal obligation to engage with the community. And so this gets back to resources. We as an entity have to have the financial resources to provide language access at, quote, all operating hours of the board. That's a legal requirement. And it's going to take financial resources. We are not going to have volunteers just regularly doing this. We need the financial resources.
And Reverend Harvey, through this conversation, we're identifying what the gaps are that we need to address to go forward.
How well does Google Translate work?
It
Not
does.
well, not well.
It doesn't. And shame on anyone who uses it.
I got one final question. Is that a requirement for city council as well to have the same abilities to translate their actions? Do they have to?
Well, I don't
Stephanie?
know if we have the
That's
answer.
is that legal requirement?
Yes. I mean, it's a legal requirement for us to be able to translate our communication. I'm asking, is it a legal requirement for the city hall and the city council? Is it a legal requirement for them as well?
Stephanie? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm honestly unsure. I'd have to look into that.
So I know that, if you go down to City Hall, you see that there are people that, like, there's different language translations all over the building because people have to have access and understand when they go downtown, how to engage in services, right? So we are essentially offering a service eventually to the community, right? So we have to be able to provide those services. Now, we're talking about on a smaller scale, something that will eventually be a very large scale. So either way, at its smallest form, Reverend Harvey, we do have to be able to provide, a way for the community to access us. So I don't know what city council's processes are. We can find out what that is. We don't know. And that is something we should find out. But for us, we do have to offer that service because it is a barrier. And remember, we are still required to fulfill the governor's order. So that is a governor's order requirement. So if you ask New York City, if they're like, you'd be asking New York City if they have the same, like, what are they doing about the same problem? Like, that's not a problem. So we have to think about that and do the same thing, I think.
And again,
I think we need to remember that it wouldn't be anyone else's job to provide us with a translator, would it? It would be our job to get the staffing for that.
and I wanted to say, if city council is, if we're currently, and in a budget sense, sub-unit of city council is ultimately responsible for making sure we have the resources we need to fulfill our legal duty. And, the legal duty about community outreach, I'm just going to read it. The board shall conduct outreach to community members, groups, and nonprofit organizations. The board shall provide language access for limited and non-English proficient individuals. That is as clear as day. We've got to do it when we do community engagement.
That's what I'm saying. Like, regardless of whether we need to or not, like, we should do it. It's just like, if we continue to claim that we represent 75% of the constituency of the city, then we just need to make
Someone
sure,
needs to mute.
right?
Mute
Like,
everyone
we
if you're
can't
not
do it
talking.
because it's the right thing to do.
Right. Okay. So I know we could continue with this conversation, but it's 8:14, 8:15. So I make a motion that if no one else has any burning
I
concerns.
think, don't we need to make a motion that we proceed with what Connor suggested? Connor said he wanted clear direction.
Okay.
So I would like to make a motion that we, that if the language
Okay.
resources we need are available, that we then proceed with the process that Connor has suggested, outlined to us this evening.
Okay. Second that motion.
Okay, all in favor of the motion that Rabbi Settle has put on the floor? Say
Aye.
Raise your hand. Okay. All right. Are there any opposed to that motion?
Just clarify what the motion is, spell it out in all its points, please.
So Rabbi Settle, say it again, please.
Okay, the motion is that if the language resources we need are available to us, that we proceed with the procedure that Connor outlined at the beginning of this discussion.
Okay, now, so I'm going to go ahead and repeat that since we have that clarification. All in favor of the motion that was just put on the floor by Rabbi Settle? Okay, go ahead, Dr. Harvey, you have a question before the motion carries?
I would say very shortly, I would say very shortly, say what your proposal is about going after the translators, Connor. What proposal? I know we're voting on your proposal, but what exactly is that proposal?
This is that proposal to have public oversight hearings that begin with people filling out forms, different members of our community filling out these forms, and then providing us with written testimony to answer those big picture questions from the governor. And at the same time, me drafting an initial set of answers to a bunch of the smaller questions that are more fine grained and detailed.
What does got to do with the translators? I thought we voted on
So the translation services have to be provided in order to do the community outreach part of this, where people are filling out those forms and providing answers.
And in the event that we're not able to get that, then the second plan would be that we as a board would answer those questions.
That's right.
Okay,
That's right.
Reverend Harvey, do you understand?
Okay.
Okay, you got that. Okay, so again, I'm going to ask for a vote then. With that, all that explanation, the motion is on the floor, and I'm just going to ask for raise of hands and also eyes. It's third time's a charm. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And Danielle, I assume you say yes? Okay.
Yes,
actually, okay,
aye,
thank you.
yes.
Aye, yes, aye. Okay, so there's none opposed, and so that motion carries. So then Connor, we're gonna go ahead and wait on that really critical piece in order to move forward then, okay?
Okay.
Okay, now, can I get a motion to end the meeting, please?
So move.
I make a motion.
Okay, thank you. So all in favor of ending this meeting tonight?
Aye.
Accountability Board, okay.